Women Up Radio, designed to facilitate women's empowerment, improve your career, develop your talents, incorporate your passions, achieve fulfillment and success.
Hello, this is Women Up Radio, supporting Empower Women, and today we're talking about evolving to genuine gender balance and the additional challenges that are found in traditional male sectors like oil and shipping. I'm joined in the studio by my guest James Bargeron, speaker, trainer and coach, focusing on high performance and leadership. Previously, James worked for more than 30 years in oil and shipping, so he really has seen both sides of the coin. Welcome to the programme, James.
Thank you very much, Anna, for inviting me on this afternoon.
So, James, can you tell me about your business? With all of your corporate experience in shipping and oil, you've definitely got a wealth of experience to draw on when training and coaching. Tell us more about what's involved with high performance and leadership coaching.
Sure. Well, when I started many years ago, the idea of training wasn't really there. You just learnt on the spot, to be honest with you. It was learning from your peers, but also the people above you. There wasn't any formal training per se, because we weren't part of the big corporations at the time. So we had to learn as we went along.
Yes, I remember that one.
Yeah. And so we were basically learning in mistakes as well as the good points from the people above us. So it was only the really big corporations, you know, the major oil companies and people like that, that started in the 80s really of implementing formal training with leadership and that sort of thing. So, but so far as the high performance when I first started was the carrot and the donkey situation, which was to try and get people to do something. And if they didn't do it, well, there's the door. That was the long and the short of it. You either performed or you didn't, and you had to get out. So things have changed an awful lot. And at the time, obviously, I wasn't aware of it. It was something that was distinctly lacking for the smaller companies and corporations. The bigger ones, as I say, especially that had the American influence, used training and leadership coaching and mentoring more than the smaller companies.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot now, but the idea of getting people to improve their performance is something which is relatively modern, to be honest with you.
Why do you think the approach has changed? Because obviously it has changed quite a lot over the last 30 years. Why have people changed their whole way of doing it?
I think it's increasing their awareness, to be honest with you, is that we're always in a period of change, because if we stay the same, you're just going to get passed by, and things have become more. I remember when I first started, we always thought that, you know, you can't keep up this pace. Well, we outstrip that every year. Things have got more frenetic as we've gone along, not just in the last few years with social media and this sort of stuff. There's more people, there's more pressures to get results and perform. There's ever increasing pressure from above. And it's just one of those situations, is that how do we keep going? How do we improve on situations? And it's this forever, this chasing of getting to always improve things, which sometimes is good, sometimes it's not so good. But we've got to look at ways that we can actually do it, but do it in an effective way that it's not really affecting people negatively. That's the big point.
Yeah, obviously I'm very interested in attitudes towards women and women's equality, women's empowerment. And I'm particularly interested to know your experience from when you were working in oil and shipping, because that's traditionally very male. So in those sectors, did you see a lot of difference, or were there any particular attitudes regarding men, women, careers and gender balance? I mean, did the attitudes change a lot? Were they very negative, positive? Did they even exist?
Oh, absolutely. The attitudes were very negative. And you're absolutely right there. It was a very male-dominated environment. And there were very few women, I think, that in all the companies and corporations that I worked with, both in this country and overseas, I think I can count on two hands the number of women that were involved. I'm not talking secretarial, I mean people at the front end that were in positions of leadership, authority, brokers, dealers, traders. There were very, very few. And it wasn't something that happened very often. It was just purely because, A, the women didn't always want to get into that line of work, being a male-dominated, egotistical environment.
Yeah.
And those that did come in, I wouldn't say that very many of them enjoyed it. I'm sure a lot of them did it for the financial rewards rather than the pure enjoyment of the job at the time.
Yeah.
It was something that we were very aware of, but it was more a culture that you got involved with, that was already there, rather than just suddenly started.
Yeah.
If you go back historically, whether it was in banking or stockbroking, and that came along, and then in this line of work, involved in transportation and shipping, they have always been male-dominated environments and industries. Yeah. And it wasn't something that was going to change overnight, and it still isn't. There's a lot more these days, but it's still not got to the point where you've got anything like a balance, as you call it.
Yeah. And did you find back then the women that you could count on two hands, did they have to do anything differently?
Well, the women that got into any sort of real positions of, let's put it inverted commas, success, got there by obviously hard work, and having to put up with a lot of challenging situations, challenging people.
Yeah.
I would say, because obviously when you've got an environment of 20, 30, 40, 50 guys, and you've got possibly 1, 2 women in that environment, and you've got a lot of pressure, a lot of shouting, screaming going on. The environment was pretty hostile, though people afterwards would go for a beer. Some of them didn't, and it wasn't an easy place for the faint-hearted, let alone a faint-hearted woman. So the women had to be very strong coming in there and to deal with the people that were in there, because when you deal with, it's a pretty volatile cocktail. Yeah. Egos, alcohol, and money. You put those together, and as you can imagine, and plus also the need to succeed and the pressures from above, it just made it even more of a cauldron. So only I would imagine I know only the toughest of the ladies or women that were involved actually made it.
Yeah, I know. When I was in Bermuda, I worked in a shipping company and an oil company, but very short term. And in the shipping company, there were 2 women that had quite reasonable jobs, quite reasonable level. One was a manager and one was in charge of, I don't know, organising the cruise or something. But I think because Bermuda, you've got very strict immigration policies, and if you aren't Bermudian, the company has to prove why they need you. Then I think they were both Bermudian, therefore they had an advantage. Small island, lots of very rich companies that wanted to have a base there, and they had to employ Bermudians. So I think it made it easier for them to actually access those jobs because it was a different atmosphere. And then I worked in stockbroking in the city, and there I can only remember one woman in the dealing room, and it was a smallish merchant bank stockbrokers, and this lady was very good at her job, but I think she had to work extremely hard, but also she was lucky that she got interviewed by the right people and she had good connections. But this is going back a long, long, long time, because I'm quite old now, so I'm sure it's changed since then. But the lady in the city, she had to put up with some real stupid comments. I think she was very patient, very mature, and she just sort of swum above the atmosphere rather than letting it affect her. But I'm not sure that all women would have found that easy. I think if I'd had to put up with some of the comments, I wouldn't have found it as easy.
I think you're absolutely right. And what you've said there is something that is very relevant, is that they had good contacts. I think that's hugely important, that if you've got people you know, you don't feel alone. You feel that you've got some sort of a support system, is that other people are aware who you know.
Yes.
That makes you feel that you're not actually on your own. And that's a huge difference, that somebody's gone out there that may want to join a particular line of work. And if they're on their own, they're obviously going to feel they've got no one to support them and this sort of stuff. So that when they're applying for something, they don't know all the ropes. They can't contact someone to go out with, to discuss things with them, to give them a bit of background information. And then it becomes even more of a challenge if they come up against somebody who's going to make derogatory remarks or is going to test their will in any shape or form. You know, the ego starts showing itself. Then unless they are really, really strong, but they also know how to work the person they're dealing with, which can be, very, very difficult. And the big thing is that, besides the culture of the environment they're in, is that they don't have a support network.
Yes.
And I think that's hugely, hugely a disadvantage to them, because obviously it's like anything. If you don't have as you've said, a support network there, well, it's going to make you feel less inclined to want to be able to fight everybody on your own, because that's what it comes down to. It's almost like a fight, which it shouldn't be.
Yeah. And I think also sometimes people take things personally, which aren't necessarily meant personally. And so you need to have quite a good self-confidence.
You do, but that comes down to a lack of communication.
Yeah.
And communication is a vital element for any organisation. It doesn't matter how big or small. I think in any of the companies that I've worked with or for over the years, the communication is the biggest problem that has caused problems, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
Or the lack of it is where people misunderstand people. With the advent of social media, I'm sure it's 10 times worse now that people putting stuff out. But emails, they can cause problems because people don't use them and they don't communicate effectively. So going back before those, people weren't communicating in a proper fashion. People were misconstruing things, and especially when you're on your own, or you don't have anyone to bounce that off.
Yes.
So was that meant in the right way? Am I imagining things?
Yes.
Or did he really mean that? Or did she mean that?
Yeah.
It's a very big area, and communication is something that companies and corporations, however big or small, really need to work an awful lot more on to help, get rid of these sorts of problems.
Yeah, it's the key. So, and during the time that you worked in oil and shipping, did you see much evolution for women over that time? I mean, you left there 8 years ago?
No, I left 2010, 7 years ago.
Oh, 7 years. Okay, I was close.
Yeah.
My maths is bad. But by the time that you left, did you see that there'd been much change towards the attitude? I mean, particularly for women in the industries, or was it still fairly slow?
I wouldn't say that it's really jumped into the 21st century. They are a little bit more forward thinking, but hasn't really been this country that's been the catalyst of that. It's been other countries, especially the Scandinavian, the Far Eastern countries. If you look at any of the shipping broking companies out there, they've been having women on the broking and trading desk for longer than we have. And especially in Scandinavia, they've got a lot more of their families that have been involved in shipping, allowing the women to come in, whereas we haven't over the years until fairly recently. And if you look at a lot of the people that the companies have employed over here, they've employed women from those countries, i.e. Scandinavia and the Far Eastern.
Oh, really?
yeah, there aren't so many still that are, I would say, you know, the European women involved in shipping oil that there were from the Far Eastern and the Scandinavians. There are more now than there used to be, because as I say, used to be, you know, in all of these hundreds and hundreds of companies, there was only 7, 8, 9 people that I actually knew that were women that working in the industry to that extent. But now there's obviously a lot more, but nowhere near what you would call, as you were saying, a balance.
Yes, yeah. So if there are women who are wanting to enter and succeed in traditionally male industries, from your sort of coaching head and your mentoring head, what advice would you give them?
Well, I would have to ask them to ask themselves, do they really want to do it? What the reasons behind it are? Because traditionally, going into those sorts of industries, you know, like banking, stockbroking, any sort of oil broking, shipping, there's usually a driver which is financial.
Yeah.
You don't go in because you think, oh, that's going to be nice, I can work a 9 to 5, because that doesn't really exist.
Yes.
And it's only when you get into those careers that you start really seeing what they're like, and it becomes, you either get out fairly quickly or you get stuck in. It's a bit like a spider's web, that once you start getting involved in that, it becomes your life. And you start, especially if you become successful, you start making, you know, good money. It's less of your time because you get wrapped up in it. And I'm not quite sure that women really understand, certainly from so far as the shipping side goes, they understand that when you get in shipping and oil, that it's quite as in-depth as you would first imagine.
Really?
And I would say really ask the question, you know, why you want to do it, because it's going to be all enveloping. And, you know, I didn't make the rules, but if women want to have children, it's and take a year off to look after, make sure that the kids are going to be looked after, and then come back to work. It's a very, very difficult industry, line of work, profession to balance both.
Yeah.
You know, it's because it's all consuming. It's not something you can just dabble in. As I say, it's not 9 to 5. That they demand everything. Your clients are very demanding, but so does your family. Yes. And that's the thing, is that to try and do the two is a very, very difficult thing. So that my biggest advice would be to ask yourself the question, you know, why would you want to get into that industry? If it's purely financial, I would ask yourself to rethink it, because it's not just as easy as that.
Yeah. And I'd say also, from what I've seen, if somebody is working in that industry, I mean, particularly stockbroking or something like that, if they want to take a year off for whatever reason, whether it's a mother having a maternity leave or parental leave, or someone going on sabbatical or something like that, coming back a year later, you're out of date. So you're not necessarily going to be welcomed back with open arms, because you just can't do the job as well, because too much has happened.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree.
And your name is no longer in people's minds. And in that type of industry, your name has to be in their mind all the time, absolutely all the time.
I agree with you totally. And the other thing you mentioned there is, you know, I used the maternity leave. You said paternity leave. I didn't, on the basis is that that's something that would be non-existent. Certainly from my old line of work, is that, I think you were absolutely spot on, is that, you know, some people didn't even want to take 2 weeks holiday, because they would come back, there would be too much to catch up on, and that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
That so to take a year out, but also this is the culture. Guys wouldn't even dream of doing that. Yeah. You would be laughed at even approach, and so that's one of the sorts of situations that they wouldn't entertain.
Yeah.
And I know from personal experience working environments is that certain companies wouldn't actually employ women for exactly that reason, is that they didn't want to invest time, effort, and a lot of money over 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, and then find that somebody was going to go away and not come back because they were going to have a family. Companies were very aware of that.
Yeah.
Though they didn't advertise it, it was very much at the forefront of their minds.
Yes, I know. I remember my ex-husband was in stockbroking and was very good at his job. I mean, he was a very high-flying career, etc. He used to leave if he was going to the local office, he'd leave at probably 7 o'clock in the morning and get back, if I was lucky, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And when he was going to one of the other offices, which were, distant, he'd be leaving at 5 o'clock in the morning, getting back at 9 o'clock at night, and also flying all over the world to offices around the world. In that industry, you don't have the option. If you want to go to the top, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, you have to do those type of hours.
Yeah, exactly. You don't make the rules. As I say, it's the culture that's already there.
Yeah.
And when you have that environment, you have the clients that are demanding, plus they're on different time levels. They don't care that it's 5 a.m. If they need you, they want to speak with you. Otherwise, they go to somebody else. As I say, when it's a 24-hour-a-day business, it's one of those things, which is where, going back to the other question, is that I'm not sure many women realise that's what it's like before they do. So do your homework, going back to that one, because a lot of people don't. And once you get caught up in it, it's very difficult to, as you say, to get out of it. But it is consuming, as you found with your husband. Yeah. Husband.
I know for things like that. And I think it's a choice you have to make if you want to get to the top in those types of industries. Work-life balance just does not exist. You have to commit. But then again, that's probably why a lot of them retire when they're 40, 45, because yes, you earn a fortune, you earn a lot of money. So you get the option later of retiring earlier or moving into a different sector or something like that. But for the key years, you have to do those hours.
Or you're forced to retire through some form of ill health or something else, and that's a big thing that people say, oh, he was fit as a fiddle. Look, and no, he wasn't. It was 25 years of stress, late nights, travel, eating the wrong things, drinking too much, and all sorts of things. And you put all those things combined, and all of a sudden, at the age of 44, somebody is not well or whatever. There was quite a bit of that as well. People were unwell.
Oh, I like being a sort of Zen hippie. It makes life so much easier.
I quite agree. I didn't realise how much of a hippie I was,
actually. So, talking about businesses in general, not just male-dominated ones or male-sectored ones, if a company really does want to evolve towards gender balance and real gender balance, do you think that they can, and why do you think it seems so difficult? I mean, I'm asking you this because I know you work with a lot of clients over a lot of sectors, so you obviously get feedback. Does there seem to be any specific reason that you can put your finger on as to why it seems to be so difficult?
So difficult to do what? To get gender balance, you mean? Yes,
to get genuine gender balance, because a lot of companies talk about wanting it, a lot of governments, etc. It's not necessarily really what they want. It's just sounds good. I know I'm being very cynical, but never mind. But some of them really...
I think you're absolutely right. I think personally the biggest problem with that is that people say they want to do a lot of things, but I'm not quite sure that their actions back that up. And I think you're absolutely right. The main challenge is, I believe, from the way I see it, is that we have been conditioned to think and do things a certain way for so many years. As I say, go back to my old line of work, we were conditioned that, it was a male-dominated environment. So, but there are more companies now where people are looking to have gender balance, but they are the more forward-thinking people who you were saying a minute ago about being a Zen hippie, that a lot of people would classify them as, but it's just forward-thinking. It's just people that are prepared to do something and back that up, rather than just go along with the status quo. Oh, well, we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
The thing is that in order for people to have to change, they have to actually look from the inside as to why do they want to change. Do they realise that it would be for the better rather than just having this way? Where are we going wrong? What are the problems and this sort of stuff? And would we be better if we had a gender balance?
Yeah.
But a lot of people, I don't think, spend the time. And the crux of it is that people look at the bottom line. They're always worried about the bottom line. And I think that's the big problem, is that when they just look purely at the bottom line, they tend to forget that the bottom line is through their people.
Yes. And
if they did that a little bit more and realised that, then they could actually start changing things, and then they would have a different culture that would get to the bottom line through their people, rather than let's just look at the bottom line and not care how we get there. Yeah.
And maybe not being aware of the other benefits and advantages that there could be by having a more diverse workforce.
Oh, completely. And that's the thing. Just going off on that particular area there, that because of the environments I've worked in, that we're talking about, the ego, and this high pressure and everything else, I'm not trying to take that away, but that's not always a healthy environment for people to survive in, let alone thrive. And when you look at having the gender balance, and you've got a real gender balance, and I don't mean just having the women come in that are going to have an ego to combat the guy's ego and it's a battle of the wills and all this sort of stuff. I'm talking about having women that have got the idea of improving, but guys doing the same thing so they can work together. And that takes leadership, real leadership, as opposed to bosses. And when you do that, you will have a much better understanding of each other within inside the organisation, what works, what doesn't, and how we can actually improve it.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at it from a different side, because I know with your wife, and you've got also 2 adult daughters and female colleagues.
Yeah.
From feedback you get from all of them, what do you think women come up against as the biggest obstacles when they are trying to succeed and really get up the ladder in large corporations or even small ones?
I think it's the initial thing is, again, is this situation wherein people start thinking too much about historically, oh, well, this has been a male-dominated environment. There is this thinking that, okay, men do this, women do that. And it's a culture that's been there for so many years. It's not going to get changed in 5 minutes. And I know it's been taking years and years and years, but it's still going to continue to do so. And that is the biggest problem, is that it's stereotyping.
Yeah.
That women can't do this, they can't do that, and X, Y, and Z. And even if you look through to the armed forces, that women have been wanting to do certain things, but we're not allowed. We're not allowing them to do this. We're not allowing to do that. Makes major news that women can actually fight in the front line and this sort of stuff. I'm not saying that whether they should or shouldn't be, but the point about it is, if women feel that they want to go and do something, they've got every right to go and ask for it.
Yes.
I just think we have to be a little bit more open-minded and accepting what the situation is. And if we're to look at a situation about how to improve, it's more a case of getting the right people. It doesn't matter if they're, Brazilian, women, male, whatever, at the end of the day. If it's the right person for the job, then that should be the person that's doing it.
Yeah.
And I think too many companies have been scared to open up and say, yeah, well, let's have women in to come and do this. And I think that's the biggest problem.
Yes, yeah.
I know. Think it's also fear, Anna, to be honest with you. I think it's fear.
Yeah.
That companies don't really want, especially if they're male-dominated companies, they don't want to have an imbalance with women. They're scared of it becoming an imbalance, if you see what I mean.
Oh, I know. So it goes too much the other way.
Yeah. oh my goodness me, she's going to take over. Oh, next thing you know, we're going to have 5 or 6 women on the board, and we're going to be left out with jobs.
Yes.
Which is pretty poor, because it's just fear.
You are listening to Anna Letitia Cook at Women Up Radio.
I don't like the idea of being a male clone, and I don't like that people, whether they're men or women really, that they feel that success is getting a seat on the board, and that's the only criteria for success. Because I think there are so many other things that you can do, other ways of viewing success. So do you think the criteria for success need to change?
Well, yeah, it's on the basis is that it's perception. That what is success? My idea of success years ago is completely different to what success is now.
Yeah. And
as I said, when I first went out, the idea that getting into the line of work I did, and lots of people become a stockbroker or this or that, is for the financial gain. So their perception of success is to have the financial rewards that he's successful. Look, he's got the house, the place in Portugal, the cars, this, that, and everything else. But they don't tell you that, he's been divorced twice. He's, his kids are in the Priory for whatever reason because he hasn't been there to support them. Anyhow. So is that real success? Yeah. Or is it the guy that is happy, still been married, well, I won't blow my trumpet, but I've been married 30 years, the same lady, been through all sorts of trials and tribulations through my corporate career.
Yeah.
So who's successful?
Yes. Yeah.
Everybody has a different idea of success. I don't think being on the board is necessarily, just the indicator of success, unless that's your indicator of success. It just depends what the person actually wants.
Yeah. I think also it's important to allow people to be more creative, so that they've got more passion, more energy for what they do. And I think that's something that corporations need to do, and make their businesses more motivating, more pleasant to work for, because I think that would help them keep talented employees happy and inspired. So what do you think they could do to try and really make their workplace more inspiring? Because a lot at the moment, I think, I'm sounding negative, and I don't mean to sound negative, because I think a lot of companies really do try very hard. But sometimes I think people are stuck in a rut because everybody does things in one way. They all stay very similar, and they don't think out of the box or try and do things differently or break the mold. And for corporations to have employees lasting longer, real talent staying there, being creative, which finally would give better results for everybody and have a better relationship for everybody. But what do you think they could do? I mean, again, asking you because of your experience with training and coaching and leadership and things like that, how do you think they can make their businesses more motivating to work for, not just for getting the results, but actually the environment?
Well, again, it comes down to one thing, which is leadership. Everything rises or falls on leadership. It's as simple as that. If you've got one guy at the top who's just purely a boss and he isn't a leader in any shape or form, then that's just going to filter down through. So people are going to be trained by fear. They're going to have the mentality, the culture, which is purely just going to be happy you've got a job, because if you don't do it, I can get somebody else in that can.
Yeah.
And, where are you going to get any loyalty? Where are you going to get any trust from people who are treating people like that? But then, lo and behold, as soon as things start going wrong for the person at the top, he's going to want support from the people below him. And guess what? He's not going to get it.
Yeah.
As simple as that. So the idea is to have a support team network of people around you that you develop, other leaders, so that you make the environment, you make the culture of the company an environment where you want it to be pleasant for people to actually come. Yeah. I think it was Howard Hughes, the famous guy in the States many, many years ago, the wealthy billionaire. He had a saying which he said that regarding exactly this, which was to regarding people was to find people with integrity and pay them a lot of money.
Very good. I know you work with a lot of women. I know you've got a lot of women clients who are very dynamic and very talented. And therefore, because of your experience of working with them as well as obviously dynamic and talented men, you understand the different strengths of men and women in business. Now, because gender balance isn't very balanced as yet, and because you, to a certain extent, there's a bit of resistance or maybe lack of knowledge, are there any recommendations that you could make to male managers or directors to help them understand and to benefit from the different strengths which men and women have? Because often they're complementary, but people just don't really know how to approach it or how to put it together. But it can really, if they do understand, it could help them lead much better and have a much more balanced and dynamic team. What do you think they could try and do to approach the whole issue better?
I think it's going to depend upon, obviously, the size of the organisation is going to be a big factor, because if you've got someone, one of the huge corporations, one of the major oil companies, or a global company with thousands upon thousands, then obviously it's a lot different than if you've just got a company that's got 200, 300, 400, 500 people.
Yeah.
But as I said earlier, the biggest thing that I found is communication. Is that people don't spend enough time learning how to communicate effectively with each other. And, everyone communicates, but they don't actually connect. And that's the thing, is connecting with people. How you spend time with that person and understand what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and what are their requirements.
Yeah.
And where are they looking to go? And when you can understand a bit more about that, then you're in a better position, you're more informed to actually help that person, rather than be fearful of that person, if it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think if companies actually sat down, and again, it goes back to the leadership, as opposed to one person being a boss there, if you got the teams, the management, the directors, all on the same page and had the same idea, vision, whatever you want to call it, for the company and where they were headed, rather than some guys thinking they were heading south, some people think they were going northwest, and a couple of others weren't quite sure. But if you've got that sort of a scenario, just because you get a few women on board, it's not going to necessarily make everything all rosy. What you need to have is an understanding, an ability to communicate and connect with people, and so that they can understand each other. Yeah. That's the biggest problem in any of these organisations, is lack of that. And that's where you get such a problem, is the turnover of staff, is that people just don't feel valued and they feel threatened by people. Yeah. That's the problem. The company doesn't cause people to leave. People cause people to leave.
Yeah, exactly. I know sometimes, well, I mean, I've been in the situation myself. I've wanted to progress and I've come up against a colleague, normally a man or a manager or somebody like that, that really, they don't have the same progressive head about promotion, particularly for a woman, that I might like. How do you think, you being a man and obviously understanding a man's brain better than I might, how do you think someone can approach a male, or how a woman can approach a male colleague or someone, a director, or someone high up, with the good reasons and explanations that's going to help them actually get them to understand why they'd be so valuable in a senior position?
Well, it's a good question. It's not an easy one, on the basis that obviously it's going to depend upon the size, again, the organisation, and so on and so forth. The person has to be aware of what they're dealing with, what they're trying to achieve, and ask questions like, is it realistically going to be achievable with the people around? If that culture of that company is such that that you're banging your head against the wall, then do you want to get a headache or do you want to leave and find somewhere else?
Yeah.
I know that may seem rather blunt, but unfortunately that's what I've had to do over the years, is that you know that the people there, you've tried this way, that way, and it causes too much stress and anxiety for you, and think, well, is there any point in this? And I've known women that have actually stayed in jobs for a number of years because they're scared to actually leave because they'll get a bad report or whatever you want to call it on their mark on their CV and stuff like this. And they're actually scared, but they're scared to talk about the situation, improving the situation in their own environment. They're scared to talk to their seniors or their colleagues about the situation. It's going back to this, it's trained by fear.
Yes.
So it's not an easy situation, but it's just a self-awareness is, hang on, am I going to be able to achieve what I really want? And then see how you can go about it and talk to someone if they're approachable. But the thing is that if they're not, sometimes you just got to leave.
Yeah.
It's then difficult.
Yeah. No, I agree, because really there's too many nice things to do in life. Do you want to spend your time fighting something? That's my attitude.
I quite agree.
I know maybe there's other feminists that wouldn't agree with me. Maybe I'm not militant enough, but I really do strongly believe that women should have equal opportunities, etc., etc. But again, if I see a situation where it's going to take endless effort, always arguing, always having to be geared up to defend or to think or whatever, I don't want to do that. I would rather go somewhere that's positive, because I'm a great believer in positivity and support and helping each other and having a nice relationship. And I think permanently fighting, it's just, life's too short.
It is, but then again, that comes down to what I was saying, self-awareness is, if you ask yourself the question, why am I doing this? Am I doing it because I want to be belligerent and the ego is taking over? Is what as you were saying, the militant, is that somebody wants to take on that person because it's wrong. Well, if you've got a group of people and you can get a posse of people together to face that head on, and you're willing to do that, then all good and power to you. However, as you were saying there, if you're looking at, you want to do your job, you want to improve, you want to make a difference in an environment, then maybe it's better that you think, hang on a second, self-preservation here, maybe what would I achieve? So you go there and you challenge people, you change a few things inside the organization, but are you going to be looked upon as the person that was, a revolutionary? Yes. Or are you going to be respected? I somehow doubt it, which is why I say sometimes it may be better to go somewhere where you're respected and you can add value to that organization and be, respected there, rather than trying to start World War III in an organization.
Yeah. Okay, I've got another question that's a bit different, I suppose.
Sure.
We're always